when I first saw this, I'm like, wait, did they redo Andoril? And then Glam, you tweeted at me a couple of hours ago about something else this
Well,
could be.
we were going through all the swords, and like the first one that popped into my brain, which is the one I don't think it is anymore, because then I hung out in Chris's stream this morning, and then we we talked about it for a long time there, and I was like, I think Chris is totally right, and I think this is Gurthang, which is the sword that killed Glaurung, right?
Yes, the dragon from the first age. And actually, I'll jump to New on this one, who's just below me. New, would you like to go into excruciatingly long detail in less than a minute about Gorthong?
All right, so
and the dragon Glaurung?
Yeah.
Right.
You have 1 minute, go.
Gorthang was originally, forgive my pronunciation, Chris and Tangwa, I'm sure, could pronounce it a lot better than me, but originally was called Angler Hill. It was made by Eol, the Dark Elf. That's an elf that was close kin to Thingol. He called the Dark Elf because he lived in his own little part of the forest, a separate forest called Nan Elmoth. He was a great smith, and he actually learned his smithcraft from the dwarves of Nargrad and Belagast. So he also found these meteorite, and he made swords out of them. So he made Angler Hill, he had his own sword, and then he also crafted another sword called Aaron Ruth, which was Thingol's sword. So there's 3 swords. The black sword that we're talking about is called Angler Hill, which later gets changed to the name Gorthang. Now, he gave this sword to Thingol for payment for him to be able to dwell in Nan Elmoth, which is separate from Doriath. So he got to dwell there by himself. Now, the story comes along with Turin Turumbar, where Turin leaves Doriath and goes in the wild. His best friend, Beleg Strongbow, goes to the king. He's like, I want to help find your foster son, because Thingol and Melian wanted to find him, and he offers his services. He goes out, he helps and tries to find him. And for payment for this, Thingol says, choose anything you want from my treasury or kingdom or whatever. He is having to fight the orcs a lot more closely. He uses his bow of yew wood a lot, but since there's a lot more orcs and they're closer, he asks for this sword. Melian tries to warn him that the sword has the dark heart of the elf that created it, its maker, which is Aol, which, if you know anything about Aol, he's an asshole. So
he's one of the biggest jerks in Tolkien's Legendarium.
I say it was initially what I had said to you was that I thought maybe it was Aaron Ruth, which was also Thingol's sword. Thingol's sword, and was handed down between the kings of the Numenorians, and eventually ended up in the hands of Elendil and some other people as well. But that sword was never broken, so this sword is very obviously broken.
So continue with lore.
Aol made the sword. He gave it to Thingol as payment for dwelling in Nan Elmoth. Beleg takes the sword after being warned not to. Nobody listened to Melian for whatever reason. He goes and he actually finds Turin again for the second time. He's dwelling. He has a sword. Things happen. They get ambushed. Turin gets taken hostage by the orcs. Beleg finds him. He actually finds him, and he goes to rescue him, and he uses the sword to cut the bonds of Turin, but it pricks him a little bit. Turin wakes up in a stupor, not knowing that it's Beleg. He kills his own friend. Man, terrible course of events. He gets taken by another elf that they're with. Gwendor, the elf from Nargothrond, who was held captive in Angband, who had escaped through some tunnels in Angband. And so now Turin is in a stupor, and he's all out of it because he killed his best friend, and he has the sword. Eventually, he comes out of the stupor with the help of Gwendor, and he carries around the black sword. He is known as the Mormagil. He carries the sword, the black sword, which means the black sword. And literally, he names the sword Gorthang. And then he uses that sword to then kill Glaurung after a bunch of events that happen. And he finds out all this crazy stuff that happened because his whole life is cursed. And he ends up killing himself with the sword because of his cursed life and all the terrible things that happened to him, because his father was cursed by Morgoth, and cursed him and his family, and he kills himself. And when he does that, he falls on the sword and the sword breaks. So the black sword that is broken that we know is the sword Gorthang by Turin Turumbar, which was Turin Turumbar. It's also known as Angler Hill. So if you see either name, they are both correct. Made by Aol, the Dark Elf, the Sindarian elf that dwelt in Nan Elmoth. I hope everybody got that. Hope it wasn't too much.
And I have to give my
that.
theory of how on earth this is going to work itself in.
Please, because I need the fan fiction to write itself, Chris. You go ahead.
Okay, so when Turin unalives himself, because
it's okay, we're not on TikTok.
Censors.
Like,
let's cool.
Be,
okay.
Yeah, let's be cognizant though of people's mental health though. So
yes.
Yeah.
So when Turin unalives himself, the remains of Gorthang are buried with him. Now, when we reach the end of the First Age, the entirety of Beleriand sinks into the ocean after the War of Wrath. That's where the Valar and a huge force from Valinor comes over, and they actually, interfere because Melkor's winning.
Yeah. He does
so
that a lot.
so they all come over. This big war happens, and most of Beleriand falls into the ocean, except for the mound where Turin was buried, which means this sword theoretically could be plundered from his grave
Could be.
by Sauron.
The only part of Beleriand to not sink is that
only part of Beleriand to not sink.
Oh, I love it.
So there is a possibility that Sauron or one of his agents could find this sword and use it for nefarious means. My thought is that if the kings of men that he gave the 9 rings of power to, if they aren't falling fast enough for his taste, if he was thinking, what could I possibly do to corrupt these guys? That sword is cursed and it worked before. So if he gets that sword and gives it to one of the kings, which king?
Yeah, so
like they would fall so much faster because the curse that is on that sword would definitely speed things up.
The sword can speak.
It can.
Yeah, it's a sentient
Did we mention
sword.
that the sword is sentient?
Yeah.
If you read Brandon Sanderson, Nightblood, the talking sword, Nightblood is very much this sword.
Crave some violence today. Jamie, you were going to talk. Tengwar teacher, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering, who is holding the sword, right? I mean, you guys just spoke a lot of things.
Yeah, good question.
Would
Very
they
good
dress
question.
Sauron in a outfit like that, or is that possibly a future king, right?
That strikes me, just personally looking at it, that strikes me, it's got a very, woolen, fur sheep kind of deal. So, brash, strong kind of human. The skin is kind of dirty, a little bit darker, more rough and tumble. Definitely not an elf. And if this does turn out to be Anglakel or some form of the sentient sword, and it was mine, I'm absolutely going to lose my mind.